Following up on the cliffhanger of Tools of Destruction, nearly 1 year later, in 2008, Insomniac teases us with the next installment in the form of a short adventure. I want to welcome you all to Ratchet and Clank Quest for Booty, a game that should have just been a cutscene and nothing more. So, let's try this again, shall we? Following up on the ending scene of Quest for Booty, nearly 1 year later, in 2009, Insomniac finally gives us what we want: Ratchet and Clank Future, A Crack in Time. First off, let me say this. This is the first installment in the series that truly emphasizes Ratchet and Clank, not just Ratchet with his handy backpack. The jump in not only quality, but also interesting ideas helped to elevate the series after the reset that Tools of Destruction's brought. Just in case you missed my last retrospective, Ratchet is on a journey to find Clank, who was taken by the Zoni, but more on that later. For now, let us talk about the most important part of the game: the guns. When it comes to weapons in this series, there is a good mix of firearms ranging from guns to cannons. In regular Insomniac fashion, we also get treated to some oddballs like the Sheepinator or the beloved P-Gun. And it's safe to say in this installment, we follow that same route with a little bit of deadlock action thrown in there. Weapons still increase in potency up into their final form at level 5, but most importantly, a few select weapons by the name of the Constructo Pistol, Bomb, and Shotgun, yes, finally, a shotgun in this damn game, can also be customized in different ways. The changes made can be switched at any time, so you never feel locked into one build, and these changes affect how the weapon may activate, its overall power, and spread. Additionally, it can add secondary effects to your weapons, which can be beneficial depending on the situation. This helped to breathe new life into a weapon you would have traditionally moved away from due to poor damage later on. While these mods are not available to all weapons, it is pretty fun to experiment with different mods to find what works best versus upgrading your weapon for more damage or ammunition. Speaking of that though, here are a couple of weapons that stood out to me during my recent playthrough. First is the Groovatron, which became an actual weapon. Nothing hits me more than seeing some robots bust down as you light them up. We also get the Rift Inducer 5000, a weapon in which a literal rift is opened up and allows a tentacle monster to throw down at the playground. And last but not least, we have the Spiral of Death. While not the most practical weapon in the world due to its slow return speed, this was my guilty pleasure. Seeing those blades come out and return with some boomerang action just looks wicked. This game also has one thing that Tools of Destruction did not: a video showing how the weapon you just purchased worked. While this is such a small detail, I do enjoy the personality it helps bring to that weapon. Remember the space exploration back in Tools of Destruction? Oh, wait. That is in this game. Not only are we able to fight in this game, but also explore it. This is not me hating on Tools of Destruction, as we know a lot of content was cut due to deadlines. And to be fair, it seems they changed the ship gameplay in every entry. But what I enjoyed in A Crack in Time was this blend of combat and exploration on one screen. As Ratchet, we go through different sectors of the Polaris galaxy and come across not only big story-driven planets, but smaller ones. Now this is nothing new, as Up Your Arsenal did the same thing, but it is a welcomed return, as they tied the Zoni, which provide upgrades to your ship, and weapon mods to these smaller optional planets. Additionally, each planet has some slight variance in what is required to complete it. Some focus on destroying X amount of enemies, while others are all about platforming. You can tell that Insomniac strove to make these planets different, as there are a ton of them. They also added more ways to get some bolts in space via towing missions, collecting, or well, ship-on-ship violence. Another detail I appreciated in this game was the platforming. While Ratchet Deadlocked was a nice change of pace for the series, the biggest thing it was missing, other than Clank, was platforming. While that made a return in subsequent games such as Secret Agent Clank, Tools of Destruction, and Quest for Booty, the reason I bring it up here is because of its execution. Since the player spends 95% of the game with either Ratchet or Clank, the traditional platforming methods had to be changed since they are separated. At the start of the game, they play it real safe with the good old swing shot. Some swinging here, some pulling there, then you meet it with Azimuth. Now this is where it gets good, as the introduction of the hover boots is absolute lunacy. These hover boots take platforming to the next level. It not only increases Ratchet's mobility, but does an amazing job of combining the race mechanics from prior titles into a more integrated experience. They also let you hover down from high areas like one used to with Clank. While it does boil down to speeding up to then hit these ramps with some Sonic action, there is once again a nice mixture of that combined with swinging and pulling to keep it fun. On the Clank side of things, he ends up obtaining the Chrono Scepter and some time bombs. While his platforming is not as intricate as Ratchet's, there is an interesting twist to it. This twist is in the form of recording his actions and seeing them play out in real time, also known as temporal recordings. Overall, these puzzles are not challenging, but it is interesting seeing segments of a room being broken up and unlocked with other versions of yourself running around. Additionally, his Chrono Scepter is capable of repairing destroyed parts of the environment and reflecting enemy projectiles right back at him. It is clear Insomniac was focused on telling the story without a focus on gadgetbots or zonies, which in this scenario works out just fine. We are almost to the story, people, do not worry, as there is one last thing I want to bring up about this game, the soundtrack. After going through these games from the very beginning until this point, I have to say this time the music just hits different. By hit different, I mean not in a good way. As it turns out, the composer by the name of David B, because I don't want to slaughter his last name, headed out after Quest for Booty. I am mentioning this not to throw sand at the new composer, but more so as an acknowledgement. David without a doubt produced some massive bangers for the series, and for that I give him my salute. Regardless of what composer comes next, they got some big shoes to fill, that is for sure. With that out of the way, it is time for the story. The game begins with Ratchet and Quark together in Zolar Forest, where we learn about the Zoni and how they tie into your ship upgrades. Through these events here, we meet Lord Vorsalon, and after escaping his grasp, we also meet another Lombax by the name of Alistair Azimuth. Meanwhile, Clank is awakened by Sigmund, a caretaker of the Great Clock. This leads to the discovery of his father by the name of Orvis, and how the clock is meant to protect time, not alter it. Nefarious returns and he sends out the Valkyries, and after obtaining the Obsidian Eye on Lumos, Ratchet is able to talk to Clank briefly. After a slight detour in the arena where he saves Captain Quark, who is a man by the way, Ratchet ends back up on Vorsalon's ship to save the captured Azimuth. Meanwhile, Clank searches his memory banks for anything involving Orvis, but stumbles across another series staple, the plumber. Ratchet receives a distress call from Clank, he parts ways with Azimuth, and together Ratchet and Clank head off to give Dr. Nefarious the old 1-2 once again. Quark then appears at Nefarious' base, or shall I say, Nurse Shannon, and roll credits, but do not worry, let us continue. Turns out old Azimuth here is a grade A piece of sh*. Clank then goes back in time to save Ratchet from dying, and together they take chase after Azimuth, who wants the Great Clock to save the Lombaxes. While this is an honorable reason for wanting to manipulate time, this decision would affect everything. Azimuth then realizes he was wrong and how selfish he was being, so he ends up sacrificing himself to stop time from changing. Clank also realizes that without Ratchet, we cannot have any more sequels, and that's all, folks. Overall, the plot of this game is sufficient. A crack in time decided to focus on building a deeper understanding of our favorite Lombax and Clank versus yet another villain. The interjection of new characters such as Sigmund and Azimuth also assisted in providing the player with an unforgettable experience. When compared to the prior entries, you can see that growth in storytelling up until this point, as the focus was on the quality of the story with just a few characters versus an entire group. But regarding the story, that's the gist of it. Now, in traditional Ratchet and Clank fashion, you can start from the beginning once again in challenge mode, but a crack in time also allows you to rewind a little bit before the final battle. If you happen to collect all 40 Zoni in the game, you can then challenge Lord Vorsalon once again after going through some spicy waves of enemies on his ship. This was a nice little bonus as I was not far off from the 40 Zoni due to vibing with the exploration. It is honestly just a well-crafted game, as going after the last few Zoni or the second championship in the arena felt just as exciting as everything else. I think the icing on the cake for this game was the Insomniac Museum. It once again helped to show how ideas came together to create a game people can appreciate. My favorite bit from it was an explanation of the planets and the focus on making the experience short but also engaging. It is also pretty cool seeing in-game assets and some of the cut content. Diving into the development just a bit as well, I learned that the original name of this game was going to be Clock Blockers, but Sony was like, we want money, so please change that. Additionally, Insomniac believed that A Crack in Time was going to be the last game in the series, but due to the good old gamers around the world, we told them with our wallets that we want more. While in hindsight that seems hilarious, in a way I could see it at that time with how the game ended. I touched on this subject a bit in Tools of Destruction, but we can see with proper development time how radically a game can change. This is not a smite against TOD, but more so just an example which nowadays is a big issue. So where does this leave A Crack in Time in the grand scheme of things? Or shall I say, how does it fare? Well, that is a great question. I honestly prefer it over Tools of Destruction, but only by a little bit, as the exploration in this game not only reminds me of the moons in the original trilogy, but exploration in general is just enough to be fun without being tedious. Maybe it was just me, but this game also gave me some Going Commando vibes, and you guys know that is my bread and butter, as it felt as though Insomniac tried to build upon their tried and true formula. With that being said though, do I think this game is the best in the series? No. I would not go that far, but it is pretty damn close.